Hey hunters, Daryl here with RackMaster. I'm delighted to come here tonight and talk a little bit about a unique hunting for deer antler sheds. We make it a mission at RackMaster to keep all our hunter friends on schedule throughout the year. I have my friend Dr. Shane with us tonight, and he's going to give us tips to become a successful shed hunter. Shane, what is a shed antler, and what is the best way to go out in the woods and start looking for them?
Well, Daryl, I've known you for several years. I know you're passionate about deer just like I am. And I know you know the answer to this, but just to go over it again, and here's a pile of sheds. The difference between an antler and a horn, let's talk about that first, because cows have horns and bison have horns. So a horn is actually living tissue. It's bone, and there's a blood supply to that, covered by a keratin sheath. Okay, that's a horn. Deer and elk and moose, caribou, they have antlers. So an antler starts out as living tissue through the summer. It's got a blood supply, it's growing, and it's covered in velvet. The antler in the fall loses that velvet covering, and you're left with a solid antler, which is actually dead bone that's attached to the deer's antler, and they fall off every fall. So that's basically what a shed is. When we talk about shed hunting, we're going out in the woods or out in the fields and looking for those antlers that have fallen off the deer, and to hunt those.
Do you have any tips or keys on where to begin looking for sheds?
Yeah, shed hunting's not easy. It can be tough. You definitely get better with experience. The longer you do it, the better off you get. So I guess I would say some of the tips is there are going to be no sheds where there are no bucks. Okay, so the first key is find out where those bucks are going to be at the time of year when they're losing their antlers. So, we're in mid-February right now. This is the time where the wild whitetails are losing their antlers. Okay, they're falling off right now. One thing to keep in mind is a deer that's not healthy may lose its rack earlier. So one that got wounded or got hit by a car and is suffering somehow, those bucks will tend to drop their racks earlier. So it may be, mid-December, you might see a buck that's already shed its rack if he's not healthy. But the healthy bucks, on average, are going to shed sometime between January and April. So we're right now in prime time shed hunting season, where probably about half the bucks have lost their racks right now.
As far as weather is concerned, is there any particular time of day or after rain, or what's any specific idea of when you should enter the woods within this time period?
Yeah, and shed hunting is like so many other kinds of hunting. There's a lot of different strategies to it. And I don't mind sharing my strategies with you. I guess I would say this. To start off with, it depends on the property that you're looking for sheds. If you're going to be the only one looking on that property, and you're not worried about someone else coming in and finding them, I tend to wait till I think most of them are off. So I may wait till late March to go look for those sheds. If I'm in a place where other people might be looking for those sheds and I want to kind of get there before everybody else gets there, then I'm probably going to hit it pretty early, because if I don't, they may be all gone, because shed hunting is such a popular sport right now. It's really gone crazy the last 10 years. So I guess if I think that someone else might get there or be there before I am, I'm going to try to get out there a little bit earlier into that section of woods. But if I totally control that area, or I'm the only one that's going to be looking, probably going to wait till March. Now, one of the downsides by waiting, till the March or the end of March to go look for the sheds is that squirrels actually like to eat the antlers. And a lot of people don't know that, but squirrels or any rodents that are out there will chew on those antlers. And when the snow's deep and squirrels don't have a lot to eat, they're looking for anything. And there's actually a lot of protein in those antlers. So I actually have one here that you can see. Squirrels have chewed on all these tines and all those points. and they're just trying to get protein to survive the winter. So that's the downside of waiting. The longer they're out there, the more likely they are to be chewed up.
Okay, Dr. Shane, me myself, if I find a shed, I like to take it home and put it on my mantle. But is there any other reason out there to collect sheds? Is there a market for them? Is there can you sell them? What for reasons would you want to sell them for?
There is actually a really good market for deer antlers, and obviously the larger they are, the more valuable they are. So and you know, if you can find both sides and have a complete set, yeah, they can be pretty valuable. But one of the key reasons that my family likes to look for sheds and that we enjoy it is because it lets us know what bucks survived the hunting season. So if we can go out and we can find a nice set of sheds, we keep those. And next year when we start putting out our cameras on our mineral sites, then we can see and we can a lot of times identify that same buck, because most bucks will kind of have the same general characteristic to their rack from one year to the next. You got any story on the pile of sheds here? Is that the stuff you found and Dexter?
Oh yeah.
This is 1 year's worth of sheds from when he was a little bit younger. Like I said, we would find over 100 sheds every year, pretty much. And so yeah, this is just 1 year of sheds. I've got a lot of piles of these around.
If I find a shed, I like to take it home and put it on my mantle. But is there any other reason out there to collect sheds? Is there a market for them? Is there can you sell them? What for reasons would you want to sell them for?
There is actually a really good market for deer antlers, and obviously the larger they are, the more valuable they are. So and you know, if you can find both sides and have a complete set, yeah, they can be pretty valuable. But one of the key reasons that my family likes to look for sheds and that we enjoy it is because it lets us know what bucks survived the hunting season. So if we can go out and we can find a nice set of sheds, we keep those. And next year when we start putting out our cameras on our mineral sites, then we can see and we can a lot of times identify that same buck, because most bucks will kind of have the same general characteristic to their rack from one year to the next.
Now that we talked about the difference between an antler and a horn, what really is an antler? What does it consist of?
Well, actually the research that's been done, there's several key nutrients that are needed for bucks to grow good antlers. I mean, obviously they need age to grow a big set of antlers. They need proper genetics, you know, it depends on their dad and their grandpa and their grandma and all that kind of stuff. So genetics plays a key role. But there's key nutrient factors too. And when the antler is actually in that growth phase during the summer and it's covered in velvet, the key nutrient that they need is protein to actually grow that rack. And because, you know, the antler is actually made of bone, a lot of people think that it, you know, may be other things, but the key nutrient is protein. And right behind protein is calcium and phosphorus, because that's what makes the bone get hard, or makes it be hard in the fall once the velvet comes off. So protein is a key ingredient. We can't have our bucks lacking protein in the summer. And then right behind that is calcium and phosphorus, which is why we have, you know, those mineral supplements such as RackMaster that we put out there for the bucks.
You were talking about protein and calcium and the stuff they need. The protein, where do they get that throughout the summer?
Well, that's a great question, Daryl. You know, protein, what in the deer's diet is high in protein? Obviously, you know, acorns in the fall is high in protein, but these deer need protein in the spring and summer months. And so if a deer can have access to alfalfa, that's fairly high in protein. Certain food plots that we put out are going to be high in protein. But one of the highest proteins the deer can get is actually browse. And you know, browse is the little branches and the ends of little stems on the tree branches and the briars, the little buds that they eat. There's you know, scientific evidence that can comprise the majority of a deer's diet in the summer, and that, you know, the browse can actually be 30 to 35% protein. So that's pretty key that they have good browse to eat. You know, and we talked about the food plots and that. And then, you know, the other key nutrients, the calcium and the phosphorus, you know, they have to get those from mineral sources, you know, either through their forages that they're eating or through supplemental mineral stations that we put out for them.
I'm so glad to meet your shed hunting dog, Dexter. Can you tell us a little bit about the dog and dogs in general as far as shed hunting?
Sure. You know, for me, one of the greatest things about shed hunting is doing it with family members. And if you don't have any family members, you know, you can take a dog with you. This is my dog Dexter. He's been trained to hunt sheds. I actually sent him to school to be trained. And you know, the nice thing about it is, you know, I'm not just walking out there by myself. My dog can walk right along with me. And you know, he's a yellow Labrador, and they have a very good nose. And the antlers leave a scent, and you know, he's highly trained to pick up on that scent. And you know, in the fall, let's face it, leaves are falling, branches are falling down, the antlers get stomped into the mud, and you know, there's a lot of antlers that you or I, if we're walking through the woods, we'd step right over them. The dog won't do that. The dog smells them. And I've actually seen Dexter cruising through the woods looking for antlers, and he'll just stop. And if you watch him, you can tell which way the prevailing wind is coming. He'll go back and forth and work his way right upwind till he finds that shed. So there's no doubt that they definitely smell them and see them. So he helps me find a lot more sheds than I would find on my own, without a doubt.
Because instead of 2 sets of eyes in the woods, you have 4 sets of eyes, or 4 eyes plus a nose.
Exactly. And that nose is huge. Like I said, I've had antlers where I stepped right over top of them, especially the smaller ones, you know, the spikes, the you know, 4-pointer sets that, you know, are small. You could step right across them, where the dog, he smells them and he picks them up. And of course, he's trained. As soon as he picks them up, he brings them to you, and he enjoys the reward of attention, you know, when he brings a shed.
So, is there anything else with dogs or shed hunting alone that you can tell me as far as any tips that stick out to you?
I guess as far as the tips, I would say, like we talked about earlier, you can't find sheds where there are no sheds. So where are the sheds going to be? You have to think about where the bucks are going to be this time of year. 2 things are important to a whitetail buck: food and shelter, or bedding. Wherever those bucks feel comfortable, that's where they're going to spend the majority of their time. And where they spend the majority of their time is where the antlers are going to most likely fall off at. So it's very important to find the food source in January, February, March. If you can find that food source that those bucks are utilizing, and then find their bedding area, or where they feel comfortable spending most of their day, and then the areas in between those 2 places are the best places to look for sheds. Having said that, bucks like to hang out, if it's really, really cold, they like to hang out on a south-facing slope, because the sunshine warms them during the day. It's comfortable for them. And it depends a lot on the weather. You know, if the weather's really, really cold and the snow's deep, they're going to hang closer to those feeding areas. If it's really cold, they're going to hang more to those south-facing slopes to soak up that sunshine. Bucks always like to hang out on a point. If there's a ridge that comes out and stops at a point where they have good, you know, they can see good in all directions, they're going to like to hang out there during the day. It's going to be a key daytime bedding area. You know, other things to consider is, you know, how much pressure is that area getting? Are there other hunters in there pressurizing that area? If there is, the bucks aren't going to hang out there quite as much. So we need to find those bedding areas where those bucks feel secure to spend the majority of their time during those 3-month time period that we're talking about.
Let's say you find a shed or perhaps a matching pair one year, and the next following year you go back to the same spot and check. Do bucks generally lose their antlers in the same area?
A lot of times they do, but you know what's funny is sometimes you'll find a complete set laying, you know, right 2-3 feet from each other, like they just, you know, fell off of the buck while he was bedded, and they're just right there. And then other times I found match sets where, you know, one antler was a mile apart from the other antler. So sometimes they'll lose one side and then carry the other side for a while. So you really never know. But if you find a really good side, you can bet your bottom dollar you're going to put a lot of time into finding that other side.
Probably depends on the size of the antler too.
Yeah.
Whether or not they're going to be far apart.
Right. You know, sometimes smaller antlers, they lose one side. They don't really feel that lopsided. if it's just a small antler, they can walk around and they feel fairly comfortable. But a lot of times big bucks, when they lose one side, their head feels a little lopsided from the weight, and they may shake it or paw at it a little bit because they can't understand why their head feels so lopsided. So they are a little more likely, the big ones, to lose their antlers somewhat close together, but that doesn't always hold true either.
I've read books on shed hunting already, and the one chapter in particular I remember was, don't just look on the ground. Is there a chance for them to be stuck in a brush 3-4 feet off the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. If those bucks are moving through the woods and something happens to catch on that antler about the time it's ready to fall off, yeah, I've found them up in low hanging branches on trees or briar patches and things like that. So yeah, you can't just train your eye on the ground. You have to be looking everywhere.
There's one more question I have for you here, and that is, you see stuff on the market that is designed to capture the antlers. I've seen people make antler traps already. How effective are those?
I think they help, and there again, you're generally using some kind of bait to draw the bucks into that area, so it's very weather dependent. If the weather's warm, the bucks aren't really attracted to that bait as much. They're going to be really spread out, and they could lose their antlers anywhere. If it's really cold and the snow's deep and they're hungry, they're probably more likely to come to that antler trap. But the bottom line is, the antler has to be ready to come off. Physiologically, that deer has to be ready to lose that antler, or bumping it on some sort of a trap mechanism is not going to make it fall off. It has to be somewhat ready to come off on its own anyway.
Why do certain times of the year, it varies why they lose their antlers certain times, different times of the year?
Well, the whitetail, it goes through a natural physiological process where when the days are long in the summer, their body has very low testosterone, and so the antlers will grow during that period. They're considered short day breeders, meaning the rut is in the fall. So as the days start to get shorter, there's a portion of their brain that actually senses the hours of sunlight. And when their brain senses that the hours of sunlight is decreasing every day, it triggers a mechanism in their brain to send out some different hormones. And one of the hormones that gets geared up is testosterone. As their testosterone level rises, the antler begins to harden underneath the velvet, and when it gets to a certain point, the velvet gets scraped off, and it goes from being a living tissue to actually a dead tissue because the blood supply is destroyed. So while their testosterone level is high, the antler's on their head, which, obviously it's used for fighting and courting of does. And then as the days begin to get longer again in the spring, their testosterone level starts to drop. And when their testosterone level drops to a certain level, that's when the antler's going to fall off of their head. And that has obviously to do, as you said in the beginning, was the nutrients and the way their body is. If they have a really, really healthy body, they're going to have antlers on more. That's true, and it's somewhat genetically related. We've watched certain bucks on our farm, that we see every day, and we know that buck lost his rack, maybe February 18th last year. And if we watch that same buck the next year, they tend to lose their rack at the same time period. So there's some individual variations there too that may have to do with genetics and some other things that we don't fully understand yet. But if a buck tends to lose his rack mid-February, he's probably going to always lose his rack mid-February unless he goes through some sort of a health crisis where he's not healthy. Then he may lose it earlier. But on average, some bucks lose them real early, January, and some bucks will hold them till April every year. And that's just individual variation between bucks.